welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candace Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'll be your astrologer today. Happy Tuesday, everyone. I hope you guys are doing well. Back at it with yet another video, and today we're going to be taking a look at Saturn's upcoming retrograde in the sign of Aries. If you guys like my content, you want to see more of it, make sure you subscribe to the channel, click the bell button below, and give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Consider sharing and definitely leave me a comment. I love to hear from you guys how you're faring, because as you are watching this, Saturn is already kind of stationing. So we have not seen the retrograde yet. That will not be happening until the 12th. But definitely a time to kind of really reevaluate what we've been dealing with since Saturn entered into the sign of Aries. So today we're going to take a deep dive. We're going to talk about the astrological effects of Saturn stationing retrograde at 1 degree of Aries, taking place on July 12th, 2025. This is a big one. I think it's really kind of shaking things up personally as well as globally, especially with Saturn joining Neptune in its retrograde process. Those two are kind of cozying up for the rest of the year. And it's nearing that 0 degree Aries point. So today I'm going to help you guys kind of unpack what this retrograde means, who this will be impacting the most, how it's going to affect your rising sign. So grab your chart, get comfortable, and make sure you hit that like button to help spread the astro love. And don't forget to subscribe so that way you guys get all the updates as we kind of go through these transits. I'm always here Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Sundays. All right, so let's get into the key details. And I actually want to start with talking a little bit about the degree of the retrograde. I also want to talk a little bit about the Sabian symbol. So first things first is, Saturn is the planet that deals with discipline. So it's about discipline, structure. It's the Lord of Karma. And it's going to be stationing on the 12th. Now, I know a lot of you guys are going to be watching this on the 8th or the 9th, but just know that coming into the Capricorn full moon, which we're going to see on the 10th of July, Saturn is already stationing and it is the ruler. So we are starting to feel the effects of really kind of reevaluating the area of Aries in our horoscope. So that house is going to show you where you're reflecting and kind of reworking some of the stuff that's been going on since the spring of this year. Now, Saturn will retrograde for some time. It will be actually moving backwards until November 27th, 2025. And that's where it will station direct. So that means the retrograde will be over, but it's going to be in a different sign. It's going to be retrograding back to Pisces, and it will station direct, at 25 degrees of Pisces. So this goes without kind of being said. If you have any personal planetary placements, 0 to 2 degrees of Aries, you are under not only a Neptune transit, but a Saturn transit as well. And Saturn will be retrograding through your personal placements. If you have anything 25 to 29 degrees of Pisces, you are going to be experiencing a Saturn, and for some of you guys, even a Neptune transit that's going to be continuing. But for the sake of this video, it's all about Saturn today. And Saturn's been in Aries basically since the 24th of May of 2025. So we've had a few short months of this brand new energy of Saturn being in this sign, but only until September 1st, 2025, will Saturn be in Aries. So we don't have very long, about the beginning of July until the very beginning of September, Saturn will be retrograde in Aries. Then it'll dip back into Pisces and it'll go direct in the fall. I personally think that this shift is pretty big. Obviously, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. So it dipping back into Pisces, retrogrades in general can mean returning, reworking, revisiting, restructuring. But this is pretty significant because this is really blending this theme of bold, pioneering energy, Aries, with dreamy, kind of spiritual, unfinished business, Pisces. So let's kind of explore a little bit more of the Sabian symbols and how this kind of connects and correlates. First things first is the degree that we're going to be reading is going to be 2 degrees of Aries, and that's because we round up when we look at the Sabian symbols. So it's actually retrograding at 1 degree and 56 minutes. We're going to be reading 2 degrees of Aries today, and that is a comedian entertaining a group, and the key word is release. So the Sabian symbols give us a little bit more context sometimes in regards to what we're going to be dealing with, or what kind of symbols to be looking for during this particular planetary shift. And the theme is personification. The symbol speaks to self-understanding through seeing the self's reflection in the mirror of light. The emphasis here is on the opportunity of self-discovery and personal growth through role play. The image of a comedian entertaining a group dramatizes the necessity or a willingness to risk, here illustrated by a creative form of self-expression designed to elicit feedback and a response of the self's outpouring. Implicit in the symbol is the importance of versatility and well-roundedness, or the ability to function completely in a variety of situations. On a practical level, the symbol portrays humor and the ability to appreciate ironies and incongruities of life. Positive at its highest, the symbol represents sparkling wit and keen sense of humor. Watch for exhibitionism and silliness, or an unwillingness to reveal the self. The accent is on self-discovery. You may see yourself in a new light or appreciate things you never realized about yourself. Communication skills should be at their peak. The opportunity, your greatest advantage lies in using a variety of approaches and techniques and keeping your sense of humor. Experiment with new ways of expressing yourself and pay careful attention to the feedback you get. Guard against behavior that outrages community values. What might seem clever or funny first may turn out to be highly offensive to others. On the other hand, this is not a time for self-effacing or hiding your light under a bushel. So stepping stones are self-understanding, self-discovery, role play, creative self-expression, entertainment, humor, versatility. I could see how this symbol is about finding joy and maybe trying to find joy in moments where things feel challenging, right? Saturn. And maybe finding some kind of like lightness through self-expression, even in like the toughest of times. And I think that if we apply this to the Saturn retrograde, it can really be suggesting that, in the sign of Aries, it's pushing us to balance discipline with playfulness, using humor or creativity to kind of navigate some of these challenges. So for the sake of the video, we're going to be talking primarily about Saturn's retrograde in Aries. We're going to be looking at that particular area of the chart. I'll give you guys predictions for the 12 rising signs. As we get closer to September, we'll be taking a look at Saturn's retrograde back into the sign of Pisces. The other thing that I think about is like the themes of a Saturn retrograde and what we kind of see. And you guys have heard me use the example. You're in a classroom, there's a teacher, giving like a lecture, or maybe you're taking a test or an exam, and the teacher walks out of the room. Do you continue to keep studying or working on your test? Do you complete your work? Are you going to be like a well-rounded kind of focused student? Or are you going to start flying paper airplanes? Are you going to pull out your cell phone, start texting? Are you going to fall asleep in class? So during a retrograde, it can represent that energy of stability and kind of commitment, maturity has kind of like exited the classroom. So I see a retrograde, especially with Saturn, is kind of hitting the cosmic pause button. And the planet Saturn is all about structure and responsibility. So this may feel like between now and the fall that there is a period where we're reviewing and reassessing and really looking at what we have been working towards personally, what we have building, and what is solid and not solid in our life. And Saturn really governs discipline, long-term goals, and also the systems that keep our lives stable. So sometimes during a retrograde, out in the world, we can see some of these things kind of break down or change direction. This is also a time where external progress slows. So we see that things are not really ready for launch. We see that there could be processes that can slow down. We're not kind of completing things. And a lot of that is because retrogrades are about asking us to kind of look inward. And a lot of this can be about our direction or our personal goals or our vision, especially with Saturn retrograde alongside Neptune and Aries. So I think of this as like an audit of our life's foundations right now, or even that particular house where we're going to be seeing the retrograde. And I've always asked myself during Saturn retrograde periods, like, okay, am I taking this seriously? Am I applying myself? Do I need to work harder? And sometimes when planets are retrograde, we have to work much harder to kind of see the effects in that particular area of our life. And I will also ask myself, like, am I taking this seriously? Am I cutting corners? Am I not committing to this? And I think that this is really, in this particular sign, a lot of it's going to be about personal accountability because it's in Aries. Now, in terms of what Saturn retrograde will be affecting, Saturn retrograde impacts areas, obviously, that are connected to Capricorn or Aquarius. These are the signs that it, directly rules, even though it's going through a different sign. But it can impact areas like our career, our personal goals, and boundaries, as well as how we handle responsibility in a nutshell. So it's going to be in a different place for all of you. It's going to be impacting everybody differently. Obviously, if you have planets in the late degrees of the water signs, early degrees of the fire signs, you're going to be experiencing trines, which can be, kind of supporting and helpful. Versus some of you guys who have planets in the early degrees of the cardinal signs or the late degrees of the mutable signs, you're still under a Saturn, conjunction or a Saturn opposition or a square. So this is where you really need to take a look at your entire chart to kind of better understand what's happening. But I do think that in general, many of us may find that we're revisiting past commitments, and maybe we're facing delays in projects, or we're confronting lessons that we thought that we had already kind of dealt with or learned. So it's not so much about new beginnings or anything like that. Like, it's going to be more about refining what's already been in motion. And in particular, you want to think about really the last several months. Now, for what to expect, I would say challenges that test your patience and your resilience. It's pretty common with Saturn retrograde. Maybe delays or obstacles pop up, but I think that they're really here to kind of teach us endurance, especially in this particular sign, personal kind of commitment and endurance. And we may feel like a heavier sense of responsibility, or maybe feel like now we're dealing with some of the karmic blowback or some of the karmic effects of, some of the themes that are tied to Saturn. But don't worry, it's time for breakthroughs, as long as you're continuing to do the work. My method has always been, when Saturn is retrograde, I'm working harder actually in that area. I don't kind of just relax and kind of chill. Like, I have to kind of focus more on staying committed. In particular, I think with some of the aspects that we're seeing to outer planets, like a sextile to Uranus and Gemini, which is going to be kind of really encouraging communication, learning, and being able to connect, and sextiles to Pluto in Aquarius, which is going to be about collective, community changes and changes revolving around our future. So there's a lot of support that's coming from some of the outer planets. And now that we see Saturn, Neptune, Pluto all retrograde, I think that this is a time where we're now going, okay, things have been quite intense for the last couple of months. This has been kind of a precursor, a dress rehearsal for some of the themes that are going to come up in 2026. How do we like where we're going? Keep in mind that Saturn is ruled by Mars, okay? So Mars and Neptune are going to be directly impacted by Mars transits. And right around the time that these two are retrograde, Mars is coming into conjunction with the South Node. So that's also kind of in true retrograde fashion, dealing with the past. South Node is the past, what we're releasing and letting go of. You're going to hear a lot of astrologers that are going to be talking about kind of saying, well, South Node Mars is pretty common for conflict, aggression, war, military operations and mobility. And I would agree with that. But it can also mean that this is a time where we're actually recognizing and realizing where frustration, conflict, anger, hostility, is actually not healthy, right? And, the collective and the personal kind of effects, the micro kind of really reflects what's going on with the macro. And if I think about Saturn and Neptune, retrograde in Aries, it's where individuals are really reevaluating where they're lost, confused, they have lower energy, maybe they have loss of direction, loss of faith, personal kind of belief or, courage. And that maybe you're feeling like you're losing steam while the South Node Mars is kind of shaping up. But it can also mean that you're releasing and letting go of the need to feel like we have to be super self-critical, we have to be mean, we have to be hard on ourselves, things have to be difficult, or we have to have kind of conflict in order to kind of survive. So I'm hoping that there's going to be a period of actually stepping away from some of the chaos and actually seeking much more peaceful, maybe even private, spiritual moments. Saturn and Neptune for many people can be, getting away from all the noise and taking time to meditate and reflect and kind of getting in check with your energy and not getting impacted by some of the stuff going on in the world. And having a sense of better boundaries, emotional and spiritual, is definitely very much Neptune. And also having a better kind of vision for yourself. So I think to kind of work with this energy, in particular, the whole retrograde is going to have some of the same themes, where we're going to be reassessing some of these boundaries, a little bit more direct, personal, and in your face, and still giving you the opportunity to actually engage and work with it and kind of dance with it when it's in Aries. When we get into September and the fall, when Saturn and Neptune are back in Pisces, it's going to feel like clown's world again. There's definitely going to be a lot of feeling like, oh my God, things are really crazy, or there's a lot of conspiracy, or, people are acting like very emotionally. So work with this period. I would say during Saturn retrograde, particularly in Aries, this is the time to reflect. Retrograde wants you to reflect, and it wants you to take stock of your goals and your responsibilities and really be asking yourself if they are aligned with your true purpose. If Aries is where we start something and Pisces is where we finish, I think this is the time to really kind of gauge where exactly we stand, where our fixed point is, where do we want to go, And then as we get into the fall, there's going to be a sense of kind of like dissolving, releasing, and letting go of things before we really kind of hit the pedal to the metal in the beginning of 2026. Now, also Saturn retrogrades are pretty common. This is a time where we start thinking about what we want to rebuild. And for some of us, it's fixing a shaky foundation in our life. And whether that is a work project or it's a relationship or it's a personal habit, now is a really good time to kind of look at things and go, okay, what is my role in this? What can I do to actually strengthen this, to fix this? And is it my job? Is it my responsibility? Certainly Saturn can be about that. And am I seeing things clearly when it comes to what I am trying to build or fix? And also a lot of this can be, well, what is fixable? What do I actually just need to completely abandon and dispose of and then start anew? So it's going to be different for everybody. I think the key here is to remain patient. Obviously, Saturn is a very patient planet. Maybe not so much in Aries. Maybe we'll find that we'll have a little bit more patience and kind of understanding and maybe even more compassion when Saturn goes back into Pisces. But this will be really, Saturn rewarding, I think, slow, steady effort. Not rushing the process, right? And I've seen this a lot for Saturn in Aries. I've seen this for a lot of native Saturn in Aries as well. A lot of the lessons actually come throughout the entire Saturn, transit, which is about 2.5 years. So if you're frustrated that you haven't quite had some of the results or some of the changes, or you've built some of the things or completed some of the stuff by now, the retrograde is a time to kind of go like, okay, one foot in front of the other. I have these goals until I'm kind of building towards this end goal, which may be, for some of you guys, another 2 years down the road. So the whole lesson is in the process, right, of actually going through Saturn through this sign. And when Saturn leaves the sign, he also leaves a gift. So there's something also to look forward to with Saturn going back into Aries, back into Pisces, I think, later this year, where we're really going to finally kind of wrap up and complete something. And we'll see trines to Jupiter and Cancer. So it's also going to be, I think, really great emotionally. It's going to be very healing for a lot of people. I would also say now is a really good time to set boundaries. Even though Saturn is retrograde, you can rework, reassess, reconfigure, recommunicate, renegotiate anything when it comes to protecting your energy, and also by saying no to things that do not serve you. So just because Saturn's retrograde doesn't necessarily mean you can't make changes. Retrogrades are a good time to make those changes. And I hope that this gives you guys a little bit more insight and kind of like how to navigate this during this time where quite a few planets are going to be retrograde here pretty soon. So if you guys are, wanting to give me any feedback about how you have some tips and tricks and how you've navigated Saturn retrograde, or maybe you have Saturn retrograde in your chart, definitely leave some comments below. I'd love to kind of hear, because it gives a lot of people some really great, valuable kind of feedback in how to navigate this. Now, Saturn retrograde specific to Aries, I think it's interesting because this is the sign that deals with individuality. This is the sign that deals with courage as well as action. So I think with Saturn retrograde in this sign, it's a little bit of like a cosmic clash, because we know that Saturn does not perform well when it's in Aries, it's in its full. Saturn wants structure, and Aries really craves freedom. It also wants to initiate new projects, and it's kind of firing at all cylinders. So this retrograde might be also really asking us to rethink how we assert ourselves, how we take initiative. Are we being too impulsive? Are we being too cautious? And it's a time really for finding balance between, I think, discipline and independence. I do expect for some of us to be revisiting how we lead. Certainly, Saturn can be about governments. It can be about responsibility, bosses. We're going to see a retrograde that's going to be in Leo. That's very much about leadership. So I think we're going to be hearing a lot of reevaluations in terms of how personal individuals are viewing leadership and whether they're losing faith in said leaders. And that can be spiritual leaders, certainly with Neptune there. That could be religious leaders with Neptune there, military leaders, Aries, commanders-in-chief, presidents, prime ministers, that kind of stuff. And I think that will happen. I think that's already happening. I think since we've seen Saturn and Neptune in this sign, there is this sense of kind of like, what's going on? What's the game plan with some of these people? And are we lost or kind of confused in terms of where leadership is going? I think that for a lot of us, we may be feeling like this is a time where if we have been holding ourselves back, or if fear has been holding us back, then this retrograde could actually spark some kind of courage, and it can help us step up. So for example, if you've been, charging forward without a plan, Saturn in its retrograde can nudge or shove some of us to actually get organized And if we've been facing setbacks in new ventures, these are opportunities to kind of like refine how we're approaching things. In a nutshell, this is a time really for this Saturn Aries energy to actually mature. So we want to channel this energy into kind of like fiery passion energy into something that's sustainable. And it's all about long-term goals. So we want to think that this is like a marathon, not a sprint, right? That's why I said we have to kind of see Saturn kind of go throughout the entire sign. In terms of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, this is really the closest that these planets are going to be before they come into conjunction in February of 2026 when they meet at that 0-degree Aries point. So this is where things get really interesting because they're retrograding very close side by side. They're both going to be very much impacted by, obviously Mars transits. Saturn and Aries will be, conjunct all the way through Neptune, all the way through Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. So as it retrogrades back into Pisces, we'll see this kind of continue, and that's bringing up this rare blend of like Saturn's kind of grounding, reality-focused energy, and Neptune's kind of like dreamy spiritual vibe. We only see this conjunction roughly every 36 years. Saturn and Neptune last conjoined in, I think it was 1989 in Capricorn, and they're building towards this conjunction that's going to be happening in February of next year. And it's almost like they're trying to build a castle in the clouds, and they need both vision and structure to make this happen. So the conjunction is interesting because it does soften the harshness of Saturn in Aries. So it can be infusing discipline with compassion and intuition. And we might be feeling inspired to pursue our dreams that really align with our higher purpose, but Saturn here is demanding that you do it with a plan. On the flip side, Neptune's foggy influence could also make Saturn feel confused or a little bit more elusive. So I think that this can bring issues with like delays or uncertainty when it comes to our goals. And the key here is staying grounded while keeping kind of like an open heart to some of the changes that are coming. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction will amplify the themes of dissolving old structures. And a lot of this is to make way for new opportunities. So it's about blending practicality with spirituality and building a life that's both realistic and soulful. For some, this could manifest as a creative or spiritual awakening. For others, it might mean confronting illusions about your goals or your responsibilities. The conjunction is especially potent because it's happening near the 0-degree Aries point, which we're going to get into in just a second. But since the late spring of this year, when Saturn entered into the sign, it crossed that 0-degree Aries point. We saw in March and April, Mercury retrograde over that 0-degree point. We also saw Venus retrograde over that 0-degree point, all kind of implementing and indicating that there was going to be some new fresh start for humanity, and it was going to be confusing. Saturn is not just about leadership, it's about boundaries and borders. Neptune is not necessarily just about spirituality, it's also going to be about immigration. It's going to be about propaganda and things that we watch or things that we kind of consume or that we listen to. Certainly changes also revolving around, spirituality and like what's going on with us in an evolutionary way. So we put it all together. We think about that 0-degree point, which keeps getting kind of activated over and over. Saturn and Neptune are going to retrograde back over that point over the next couple of months. And 0 degrees of Aries is, I think, probably one of the most powerful degrees in all of the zodiac because it is the start of the zodiac. It is that first kind of burst of life. That's that first breath that we take. So it's known as the degree that's really about sparking new beginnings, and it's tied to global events and collective energy. It is one of the 0-degree cardinal points, which is associated with the world axis degrees, which when we see planets sitting at these degrees, we see really big events happen out in the world. So with Saturn and Neptune both retrograde around this point, I think it's a very big deal because now we've already seen it in action when they were direct. We have seen things that were kind of confusing and back and forth when Mercury and Venus retrograded over it. I think Saturn at this degree is really going to be bringing about new structures and how we assert ourselves as a collective. And I think it's going to spark global conversations about leadership, responsibility, as well as identity. So I'm thinking a reevaluation of policies that have been put forward, shifts that we have been kind of taking on a societal level, and also reevaluating some of the things that have been going on with authority through the retrograde. Obviously, Neptune's there as well, so this is going to add that kind of spiritual or idealistic level, or I guess layer to some of the stuff that's going on. And it's definitely been pushing for maybe in Pisces more compassion, but I've noticed since Neptune has been in Aries, it has been this kind of like blind allegiance, you know, to whatever your culture, your political party, your religion, you know, your belief system. And this is not like for the faint of heart. I mean, we saw similar transits happening with Neptune, you know, taking place during the Civil War. Obviously, we saw how that materialized, you know, people being so kind of like committed to their philosophy that it actually erupted into, you know, a separation of states in the United States. So, you know, this is bringing about, I think, a lot of confusion and or idealism that really needs Saturn's grounding. So thankfully, you know, they're retrograding side by side, and retrogrades can turn the focus inward. It can be like things have been really crazy and kind of hostile, you know, or there has been like this loss of ourselves or our personal vision or our belief over the past couple of months, giving us the opportunity to really reflect on our foundation and our ideals, and, you know, asking ourselves, are our systems actually serving humanity? You know, are we chasing illusions, or are we building something real for the future? Now, in terms of like global impact, like I said, not only a reassessment of leadership, but it could be like leadership shifts. It's pretty common when we see Saturn retrograde. Governments or institutions can be facing reckonings, you know, with new leaders emerging or old ones that are being challenged. We can see social movements and a push for independence. Obviously, Aries, balance with compassion, Neptune. So we could see more activism that can be kind of coming up, and personal activists that are kind of popping up, especially for their, you know, beliefs or their concerns or their personal causes. We can also see economic or structural reforms, which can happen. And a lot of that's connected to Saturn, obviously, with, you know, Saturn highlighting flaws in global systems. So this could be housing, this could be labor. And while Neptune is inspiring visionary solutions. It's not unusual also when we see Saturn retrograde that there is a breakdown of something, okay? Something breaks down. So we hear, you know, there is a bridge, or there is a breakdown of a building or a foundation of something. And it could be literal or figurative. That's what I like about astrology. So it could be literally, you know, we're seeing a lot of issues with foundations and water. I mean, you know, certainly we've heard a lot about massive rains and flooding and things that are kind of happening, but that can be all over the world. It's not limited to one particular place. And the impact that that's having on individuals, right, Aries. Neptune is water, so anything revolving around water, submarines, coastal cities, coastal borders, anything revolving around like the military, Aries. And so Saturn and Neptune is like, is there a change of direction with leadership within some of these particular Navy or military branches? Is there a change in direction with like leadership or authority with some of these things? Do we start to see that there is issues with coastlines, or there is issues pertaining to structures underwater, right? Underwater is very much Neptune. So I'm thinking about, you know, cables. I'm thinking about communications. I'm also thinking about gas and oil, because Neptune can be very much tied to that. So with that connection with Saturn, I have had a theory all along that a lot of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries was going to materialize as there being some kind of conflict where we were going to see shutdown of certain naval ports, or we were going to see issues with being able to get boats to or from places, and it was going to materialize as a gas or oil war. And I still think that's happening. We've seen that in parts of the Middle East, and we may still see that continue, but I think that that's really what this is leading up to, is that it's going to be about natural resources and some of the military mobilization that we're going to see around some of these places. Anyway, obviously this is a pivotal moment for the world, really to redefine what it means to take action, and with purpose and I think heart. Now, for who's most affected during this, obviously there's going to be a whole number of kind of key players. I think the star players are going to be anybody who's got any planets about 0 to 3 degrees of Aries. Okay, so sun, moon, rising, or personal planet. That's because Saturn as well as Neptune will be retrograding through those parts of your chart. But also anybody who has anything 24 to 29 degrees of Pisces, because Saturn will be retrograde back through these degrees in the fall. Neptune is still going to be hanging out around 28, 29 degrees as well. So if you have anything around there in Pisces, you're under Neptune transit. And then second, I would say, you know, Saturn retrograde does impact my Capricorn risings, my Aquarius risings, because your traditional rulers is Saturn. So that's going to have an impact on you guys. And then also my Cancer and my Libras and my Capricorns, you guys will be feeling this, especially if you're the first like 3 degrees of that sign. You'll be going through a Saturn opposition or a square. So quite a number of people are going to be impacted by this transit. I think Saturn being conjunct Neptune also, and Neptune being the ruler of the North Node, or one of the rulers, is also very significant for the collective. So nobody really gets a pass. But in a nutshell, if you happen to have Aries 0 to 2 degrees, whether it's your sun, moon, or your rising, what's going to happen with this retrograde is it's going to manifest, I think, as like a personal wake-up call. Saturn is asking you to really mature your identity in some way and focus on your leadership style. And you might face some setbacks, but they're helping you kind of build resilience. If you're Pisces, sun, moon, or rising, 24 to about 29 degrees, you will have the Saturn transits coming through in the fall. Different energy, but certainly it's important for you because this is going to be Saturn shifting or dipping back into your sign. And it's going to be about releasing illusions and grounding your dreams in reality. So for a lot of you guys, it's going to be less about action. It's going to be more about spirituality and kind of growth in terms of your like vision for yourself. Capricorn and Aquarius risings, obviously Saturn is your modern ruler or your traditional ruler. So you feel these retrograde lessons very deeply. Capricorns might be reassessing their long-term goals, while Aquariuses can be thinking about their role in community or innovation or anything kind of connecting to their ability to communicate, connect, and learn. And then, like I said, the cardinal signs, so Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, if you have placements in the early degrees, you're going to be under a Saturn square, or an opposition. So this will be pushing you to balance action with responsibility in key areas of your life. If you know your chart, great. Make sure you take a look at least, at the very least, Aries in your chart. See if you have any planets there, and just know that that house is what's kind of under construction. If you're not sure, you can definitely check out astro.com, plug in your birth information. You can check your chart there. You can book a reading with me or drop your details in the comment section below. There's always people who are willing to kind of help you guys out and help you figure out what's going on with your transits. Now, for world predictions for Saturn in Aries, I would say other than the leadership challenges and themes that can be coming up with changes in leadership and also personal people kind of out in the world, playing more of a role, I think, with social activism. I think we're going to see innovation in systems. I think we're also going to see economic shifts. So Saturn and Neptune together can be sparking reforms in housing, education, healthcare, and really be blending practical solutions with visionary ideas. Economic shifts, because Saturn retrograde is going to highlight the flaws in economic policies and also in the economies. And this could be things like supply chain issues, labor disputes, or pushing for restructuring. So this will be a time where we're going to see the world is rethinking how we take action collectively. And a lot of the individual kind of influence and the people who are getting more involved in some of these changes. Personally, very different, and it's going to depend on your chart, but I would say watch for potential setbacks because that can happen during a Saturn retrograde. We're coming into second half of July here soon. Mercury's going to be retrograde, Saturn's retrograde, Neptune's retrograde, Pluto's retrograde. If you're somebody who's like, oh, I'm wanting to launch a new business, I'm wanting to start a new job, I'm wanting to make some of these changes, may not be the best time to do that. We want to do that when some of these planets are direct, and we're definitely going to see better energy as we're getting into the fall for forward motion. But so many planets that are going to be retrograde here over the summer is really having us reassess and reevaluate. And I think Saturn retrograde forces us to kind of refine our approaches. It's not about giving up. It's about taking our time because we know that Saturn is going to reward persistence. Obviously, on a personal level, refining leadership. So this is a chance for many of us to step into our authority. And whether this is at work or at home, or when it comes to your personal growth, really taking accountability and stepping into that role and realizing and recognizing we can. For some of us, it can be easier to actually make that commitment and make that change while Saturn is retrograde. So I think that that's a wonderful idea. I think it really requires us, obviously, to confront our fears. Aries rules courage. So we might be facing our fears about taking risks or asserting ourselves. And I would say lean into that now while Saturn is retrograde, because it can be a little bit easier to kind of get into the swing of things rather than when Saturn is direct. And obviously we have to balance passion with patience. Because Aries wants to go fast and Saturn says slow down, we have to find a sustainable pace for our ambitions. And then you throw Neptune into the mix, and it's about listening to our intuition and where we need to do more, where we need to pull back. And I think that Neptune can, in a way, be guiding us towards goals that align with our soul. So if you're feeling this transit already, let me know. Drop me a comment below. I'd love to hear from you guys. I'm going to take you now through the 12 rising signs. I'm going to show you where Saturn is retrograde. Like I said, some of you guys are already feeling it. Definitely a big theme with this up and coming full moon in Capricorn, especially right after the full moon. We're going to see that, Saturn is going to go retrograde. So I think it's going to be bringing up some of these themes about career, personal accountability, long-term goals, and whether or not we're actually showing up to make that stuff happen, or if we're just kind of like falling asleep at the wheel. So I'm going to show you guys the Saturn retrograde from the perspective of the whole rising signs. I'm a Western astrologer. That's the system that I like to use. And I'm going to be doing this from the whole sign astrology. If you guys happen to use Placidus housing system, totally fine. You just need to find where about 1 to 2 degrees of Saturn is in your chart in Aries. But because it's so close to the very beginning degrees, I really recommend listening to your whole sign, because I feel like there is going to be a lot of truth to this. We're also going to see Saturn retrograde from Aries back into Pisces. So you can also kind of in the back of your mind think about, okay, I'm not necessarily launching or starting or, pushing forward with some of these things here physically. Maybe emotionally, I'm kind of reevaluating where I'm going, knowing that you're going to have to go back to Pisces in the fall, and you're going to have to dissolve things, release things, heal things, let things go before we really kind of put on our game face, or I guess I should say our war face, and we kind of take on some of these brave new challenges at the beginning of 2026. Listen to your rising sign. That's going to tell you quite literally which house Saturn is retrograding in. That's going to be showing you the themes and the effects of what's going to be taking place with this retrograde. You can listen to your sun sign. It may very much apply to you, especially when it comes to your career and your overall kind of energy and joy. And you can listen to your moon sign. That's going to help you understand things better emotionally, and choose your own adventure, whichever one you guys want to listen to. Hopefully that's helpful. I'm going to be giving you guys the themes, predictions, and tips for this Saturn retrograde in Aries for the next couple of months, at least between now and the beginning of September. And we're going to start with none other than Aries and Aries risings. So what's up, Aries? How's it going? Man, you got a lot of retrogrades now in your sign. You guys kind of like trying to figure out life, I would imagine. Saturn is retrograding in your first house. Okay, so you just got like a sample of what really needs to be worked on and reassessed before you get to next year. And it's been my experience seeing a lot of Aries risings. I have some of them in my life. I have an Aries descendant. That when I look at the Aries rising horoscopes, there's a lot of things that you guys are needing to wake up to. Okay, and whether that's becoming more self-aware, or that's paying attention to what's going on with your health, or maybe that is about your own personal vision, whatever it is, now that it's retrograde, it's showing you these are the things you weren't aware of. Now you're aware. Now you can kind of turn within and you can work on them. So that way you can really prepare for 2026 when that Saturn-Neptune conjunction really happens. Okay, so the theme here with Saturn retrograde in the first house, which is about self-body identity, is redefining who you are and how you show up in the world, right? Saturn rules your 10th house of career and responsibility and reputation. It rules the 11th house of networks and goals and friends and allies. So it's a lot of like, how are you learning to believe in yourself? How are you learning to kind of find that ability to, rest and recharge when you need to, Saturn, Neptune in the first, be maybe dissolving old identities and old things. I do think that for a lot of you guys, you're feeling tested in your confidence or in your leadership skills. Maybe there's been some setbacks, but they're pushing you to mature your approach to self-expression, how you lead a group of people, how you change directions in your career. And I think that this is about finding a much more a mature approach to self-expression. Now, as Saturn hits Pisces in the fall, it's going to be reflecting on some of the subconscious fears that are kind of hanging around and things that are more emotional or spiritual or things that are kind of behind the scenes. Take action while you can. That's my advice. I would say also embrace discipline in how you present yourself to the world. Work on long-term goals for your personal brand and meditate to connect with your inner strength. Know that the Mars transits are very significant, as not only they're tied to your chart ruler, but it's connected to Saturn and Neptune. And I'm thinking Saturn and Neptune retrograde in the first house for a lot of Aries and Aries risings. It's health, habits, sleep, psychological issues, physical issues. And you really have to watch your health and the impact that your habits or your workspace or your daily routines is actually having on your physical body. And it can be things that you're not aware of that are kind of like catching up to you. Okay, so as a tip for you guys, embrace discipline in how you present yourself. I really feel like this is going to be the test to get you ready and get you prepared for what's going to be coming next year. Good luck. Let me know what happens, Aries. Would love to hear from you guys. We've got Taurus and Taurus rising. What's up, Taurus? You're going to be experiencing Saturn retrograde in Aries in your natal 12th house, Taurus. And this is the house of spirituality, your subconscious, things that are hidden, self-undoing, hidden enemies, your bedroom, your dreams. A little bit more behind the scenes in some ways. Saturn is directly tied to your 10th house of career, reputation, your professional life, as well as your belief system, education, travel, legal matters, teaching, publishing. So with Saturn retrograde in your 12th house, I could see for a lot of you guys that this is about facing hidden fears. It could be about building spiritual discipline. It can be about meditating more, finding time to be alone in nature more, wrapping up old projects and things behind the scenes. Maybe there is a sense of letting go of one facet of your public identity or your career to embrace something new, not being as visible in the process. I do think that I predict for you guys that you might be confronting old traumas or like limiting beliefs that are coming up for you, especially when Saturn is retrograde. I think that's a time where that's going to come up more. It will retrograde back into Pisces in the fall, which I think is going to be more about kind of going out of the shadows, putting yourself back in a group or a social dynamic, being seen a little bit more. But right now it's a time for deep inner work. So for many of you guys, you might be considering trying therapy or journaling to process your emotions, maybe setting boundaries in private spaces, trusting your intuition, especially as Neptune is amplifying some of the spiritual effects that you're having with the conjunction to Saturn retrograde. Good luck, Taurus. Let me know what happens. We've got Gemini and Gemini rising. What's up, Gemini? Saturn is about to turn retrograde in the sign of Aries in your natal 11th house of friends, community, goals, and allies. Now, the good thing is with this retrograde for the air and the fire signs, for the most part, it's still pretty friendly, especially if you're in early degrees. You do happen to have Uranus now in your sign. So as it retrogrades, it's sextiling Uranus in the first house. And it can definitely be kind of tying into some of the themes of having more freedom and kind of spontaneity. Anyway, Saturn is directly connected to your 9th house of belief, philosophy, travel, higher education, as well as the 8th house of joint assets, resources, other people's money. Change is psychological shifts. Karmic entanglements, too, is very much 8th house. So as Saturn is retrograde in your 11th house, some of the things that you're going to see is restructuring your social circles and some of your long-term aspirations or goals, reconnecting or reassessing certain friendships, maybe creating boundaries with some people, maybe focus on starting new groups or joining new groups or getting out there and mixing and mingling with new people. I do predict that friendships or groups might face some kind of challenge. And a lot of this is because it's pushing you to clarify your role in communities. Maybe it's pushing you to clarify your goals. Maybe you're having to kind of find ways to better work and collaborate or lead a team. Now, you'll see in the fall, Saturn will go back into Pisces, so will Neptune, and that's going to be a little bit more challenging for Gemini risings, especially if you're a late degree, because this means that then you're going to be really focusing on major, changes and directions with your career. And it could be bringing much more creative or confusing energy, when it comes to your professional life. So my advice is work with this retrograde while it's in good aspect to Uranus in your sign. Maybe be selective about who you align with and focus on goals that inspire you, and network with purpose, not just necessarily for having fun. Good luck, Gemini. Let me know what happens. All right, we've got Cancer and Cancer rising. What's up, Cancer? All right, Saturn is turning retrograde in Aries in your natal 10th house. And the 10th house is all about, well, first of all, personal karma. So it's 10 signs away from your ascendant. So if you're a Cancer rising, this is kind of like the major reassessment period of not just your career, your public life, but like, who am I? What am I doing out in the world type of thing. When you have a early degree Cancer, Sun, Moon, or Rising, so I'd say 0 to about like 3 degrees, you're really feeling the effects of this square a little bit more strongly. Everything is out in the open. It's out in the public with this retrograde in your 10th house. And Saturn represents your careers, clients, partnerships, spouses, business partners, as well as the 8th house of joint assets, money, and resources. So something to think about is, you have had just a smidge of a taste of Saturn and Neptune in the 10th house. And this has been really bringing up for a lot of you, I'm starting a new career, I'm launching my own business, I'm going in a different direction, or I'm taking on more responsibility at work, or, there is something where there is a lot more responsibility, but also confusion, right? Neptune, when it comes to your professional life. So I think for a lot of you guys, this is a time where you're reassessing your career path, your public responsibilities, but also simultaneously, who has your back? Who are you working with, or who are you closest aligned with? 10th house can also be your status. So it's not just about work. Sometimes it can be your marital status, your relationship status. It could be, you go from being an employee to being a CEO. And now that's under reevaluation right now. And you can be kind of questioning whether or not you have the capabilities of being able to succeed, or if you're in the right place. I think that I predict for you guys that, work projects, they may stall a little bit, like particularly for Cancer risings. This is not a time to be like, I'm launching a new business or I'm starting a new job. It's like a time to kind of settle into what you've been doing and kind of feel it out a little bit longer, or reassess what you're going to be doing next. This is really meant to kind of like help you refine your professional goals. And when Saturn retrogrades back into Pisces in the fall, it's going to go into your 9th house, and it could be highlighting like creative or compassionate career shifts. Will play a little bit better, especially as it trines Jupiter in your sign. So a lot of you guys might be like, actually, I don't like my job. I'm going back to school, or, I'm going to get into teaching, or I'm going to be publishing. Or there's like a mentor that'll come in that'll help you with that process. So for right now, I think it's about taking a leadership role, reevaluating it, even if it feels scary, kind of seeing how you navigate being in this position. Maybe focusing on building a sustainable career plan and staying open to intuitive insights about your path, right? Good luck, Cancer. Let me know how that's going for you guys. All right, we've got Leo and Leo rising. What's up, Leo? You're going to experience Saturn retrograde in the sign of Aries. It'll be taking place in your natal 9th house in a fellow sister fire sign. If you're in early degrees, Sun, Moon, or Rising in Leo, first couple degrees, you're experiencing a trine, so it is friendlier for you. And for you guys, this is happening in the 9th house, which deals with foreign travel, higher education, legal matters, your belief system, anything in regards to expansion, the bigger picture of life. Now, Saturn rules your 6th house of health, habits, routine, and also like sometimes like sacrifice or service, as well as the 7th house of relationships, partnerships, business partners, therapists, marital partners, all that stuff. So it's going to be turning retrograde in your 9th. And for me, this, I think, really is about revisiting your philosophies and kind of broadening your horizons. Yes, you might be reevaluating a direction forward when it comes to whether or not, you can continue to work with a teacher or a mentor. Maybe it's going to be reassessing your education plan. Maybe if you are having some pretty dramatic changes with relationships, you are seeking maybe a therapist, or maybe you're seeking somebody for legal counsel, certainly. But I think that really what this does with the retrograde in the 9th is it's going to have you look at travel, education, or your spiritual pursuits, and where there are some blockages, where there have been some delays. And look at the delays as something that's teaching you patience. The Pisces energy, when Saturn retrogrades into Pisces, which will be in the fall, this is going to kind of deepen your connection to hidden truths, emotional, kind of spiritual healing. But for right now, it is in a decent aspect to your sign. So I feel like a lot of this is like, okay, I'm really thinking through planning out a trip, or I'm really thinking through completing a project, or publishing something, or teaching something, and taking your time throughout the process. Now, I would just say as a tip, study something meaningful, question your beliefs, and ask, are they still serving you? And embrace spiritual growth with discipline. Good luck. We've got Virgo and Virgo rising. What's up, Virgo? you're going to experience Saturn retrograde in the sign of Aries in your natal 8th house. Now, Virgo, this is a sign that in conjuncts or quincunxes you. So it can mean that this is an area where it's been kind of like a little bit of a blind spot. Obviously, the 8th house is the house of transformation, shared resources, intimacy, trauma, endings, beginnings, death, rebirth, taxes, inheritance, all of that stuff, and intimacy as well. Now, Saturn is directly tied to your 5th house of romance, children, creativity, and self-expression, and is also connected to your 6th house of health, service, habits, and routine. And it will be retrograding. What I'm especially interested in is the fact that Mars going through your sign in the South Node is directly connected to Saturn and Neptune. And for a lot of you guys, yes, okay, Saturn retrograde, in the 8th, transformation of intimacy, right? Finances or deep emotional bonds. But I think this is very personal for you guys. I think this is about facing challenges in shared relationships or finances, maybe pushing for deeper trust and learning to let certain things go, like not being so defensive. Like the connection to South Node Mars with Saturn and Neptune is like kind of letting your defenses down, being more vulnerable, right? And not feeling like you need to be pushing back or having conflict, or, that you need to be also like afraid of connection or intimacy, or being transparent when it comes to 8th house matters, right? I know some of you guys might feel like you're like, I'm giving up the fight. I can't fight it any longer. I'm just going to give up. But I think it's actually more than that. And I think you'll see that, especially when Saturn comes back into Pisces in the fall. Yes, if you happen to be the late degrees of Virgo, Sun, Moon, and Rising, you're going to be under a Saturn opposition, but you will have the North Node in your 7th house. You'll have eclipses in your 7th house, which is going to play very well especially in the fall, with some trines to Jupiter. And I think that this is going to be bringing, some kind of spiritual healing to relationships and partnerships. Certainly, Saturn conjunct Neptune is very much about partnerships and not just being together and being committed, but the physical, the financial, the spiritual, the emotional kind of connection that needs to also evolve with Saturn and Neptune in your 8th house. So I would be focusing on being honest in partnerships. I think that this is about reviewing debts or investments very carefully. Also leaning into vulnerability as a strength and trying to kind of find ways to be able to build stronger together through said vulnerability. And that, with the tie to the 5th house, this could also be for some people, child support, joint financial investments. It could mean that there is like therapy going on to heal inner child issues, or where relationships have changed because of children. So there's a lot of things that are kind of built into this. But I think that for a lot of you guys, it's about having the courage to kind of confront some of the things that you have been afraid to kind of deal with. And like I said, leaning into vulnerability as a strength. Good luck, Virgo. All right, we've got Libra and Libra rising. What's up, Libra? You're going to experience Saturn retrograde in the sign of Aries, your opposite sign, in your natal 7th house if you're a Libra rising. Now, if you happen to be Libra, Sun, Moon, or Rising, I would say 0 to about 3 degrees. You're under a Saturn opposition this year. So, with Saturn and Neptune kind of being in opposition to your placements, can be a little challenging and a little confusing. What you need to know is that the 7th house deals with relationships. So whether that's with clients, business partners, spouses, one-on-one relationships, commitments, it's also your marketplace. And Saturn has a direct connection to your 4th house of emotions, home, family, and the past, and the 5th house, which deals with children, creativity, self-expression, and romance. So as Saturn is retrograding through your 7th, what it's meant to be doing is restructuring one-on-one relationships for you. Some of you guys will hear from people from the past. Some of you guys will be reconnecting with a therapist. Others are going to be reassessing a current relationship, questioning whether or not it's going to have the capability of like going the distance, especially with the conjunction to Neptune, where there can feel like there are some problems, there's some issues, there's some clarity issues that are going on. I've talked to a lot of Libra and Libra risings. For some people, it's dealing with partners that are having, alcohol or drug addiction. Others are keeping secrets. Other people are longing for a relationship. I've also seen some people who are needing like foreign related partners. So it really depends on your own personal chart. But I would say that I predict for many of you guys, partnerships, be that romantic or business, feel like they're being tested right now. And it's requiring clear boundaries in relationships. Now, what you will find is, when you see Saturn retrograde back into Pisces, it's going to go into your 6th house. And that's going to be about kind of softening the conflicts with compassion, maybe finding better systems or better routines or things for you personally to kind of stick to, which can keep you grounded and clear, and then give you much more kind of clarity about the direction of where relationships are going as you get into the beginning of 2026. My advice for Libra risings is that you have to set really healthy boundaries in relationships right now. This is about communicating, your needs very clearly, maybe working on compromise. Certainly Saturn does very well in the 7th house because of its natural association with Libra. And what you're going to find, Libra and Libra risings, is that there's a lot of stuff going on over like the next 2 months that's going to bring all of this to like a head. It's not just Saturn and Neptune retrograde in your 7th house. It's the fact that, the dispositor Mars is about to hit the South Node, and that's going to kind of show you some secretive tendencies or things that are going on with relationships that you're currently in, or things that are coming back up subconsciously from the past. And then you will see over the summer, Mars will go into Libra and oppose Saturn and Neptune. So it's almost kind of setting up where it's about to reveal more of other people's true nature to you. And whether you're picking up on it intuitively, or it's something you find, or it's something that kind of comes up in a dream or in a reading, it's going to set something in motion that's going to make you really kind of assert your boundaries a little bit more strongly as we're getting into the end of July and going into August. So hopefully that's helpful for you guys. Make sure you're working on compromising. Just don't lose yourself in somebody else's problem. Good luck. We've got Scorpio and Scorpio rising. What's up, Scorpio? Well, similar to that of Virgo, you have got Saturn retrograde in conjunct or quincunx your sign. So especially if you're like an early degree Scorpio rising, Saturn is now retrograde in a sign that's in a bit of a blind spot. I think maybe you navigate this a little bit better than Virgo because Aries and Scorpio are both kind of connected to Mars, so you can manage this energy better. But in conjuncts feel frustrating. It's almost like there's something you can't quite that itch you can't scratch, or something that you can't quite put your finger on. Saturn is retrograding in your 6th house, and the 6th house is about pets. It's about work, your office space, your coworkers, your routines, anything connected to your habits as well. So Neptune is also retrograde in this house, so it's already kind of given you a little bit more insight of maybe where you're not totally committed to a health or a lifestyle change. Maybe there have been some health issues that have come up, or allergies that have come up, or maybe there has been some changes revolving around your habits or your work or your schedule. So Saturn is now kind of like releasing some of the pressure in this part of your chart. So in some ways, this is beneficial because you don't feel that impending, I have so much work to do. And what it's going to do is it's going to tie in the themes of the 3rd house of communication, learning, and the mind, and the 4th house, home and family, to the 6th. And this is going to be about kind of refining your daily habits and finding a better work-life balance. Spoken to a lot of Scorpio risings. I have a lot in my life. I'm a Scorpio, so I've definitely felt the Saturn Neptune in the 6th house as needing to have more structure with a routine, and like a lot of that being on me, right, Aries? So I feel like for a lot of you guys, work or health routines, they need an overhaul. And it's about really kind of reassessing, where am I working too much? Where do I have to have a better schedule? Where do I need to be more mindful of what I'm eating, what I'm drinking, what I'm watching, what I need to kind of get rid of? And I think what you'll find is when Saturn retrogrades into Pisces in the fall, Neptune will be there as well, and it's going to be trining, especially if you're a later degree Scorpio, your ascendant, which is really going to help you kind of embrace some of this change. Saturn and Neptune in the 5th house is also going to be bringing up themes revolving around creative projects, self-expression, dating, children, and you are the sign that is going to experience a grand water trine. So I think a lot of this is, in order to have more creative time for hobbies, or to date, or to hang out with my kids more, or whatever, you're like, I actually need to get a handle on my schedule. And I think for a lot of you guys, it's also about finding the opportunity or the ability to make that change. And Scorpio risings, you guys resist that a little bit, but eventually you kind of come around. So I'm predicting for many of you guys that, a work or a health routine really does need an overhaul. And Saturn, when it goes back into Pisces, is going to highlight kind of the creative, the spiritual, the emotional health practices that are going to help make this possible. I would say, as a tip, create sustainable routines. You have to prioritize self-care. It's all on you, Aries. And it's really focusing on mental health and about being disciplined, but also gentle with yourself, and knowing how much is too much when it comes to work. Good luck. We've got Sagittarius and Sag rising. What's up, Sag? You are going to be experiencing Saturn retrograde in Aries in a fellow sister fire sign in your natal 5th house. So if you're an early degree Sag or Sag rising, 0 to about 3 degrees, you're under a Saturn and a Neptune trine. So it's a little bit more friendly for you guys. Obviously, the 5th house deals with romance, creativity, joy, children. It's also very much connected to self-expression, self-love, being on stage, creating, sharing with other people. So Saturn retrograde is tied to the 2nd house of money, resources, and self-esteem, as well as the 3rd house of ideas, communication, and learning. So there's a lot of like reassessing, what can I create? How can I find ways to better connect and communicate with people? How can I express myself better? And also how can I make a living or an income from this? So you're going to be reassessing throughout the Saturn retrograde creative projects and like how you can better kind of express yourself. Maybe reconnecting with romantic partners from the past, maybe getting reconnected to an inner child energy that you need to heal through journaling or some kind of creative self-expression. Finding ways to better connect or communicate with your children or things that are changing, revolving around children, as the 5th house is connected to that as well. Now, I predict for you guys that creative or romantic pursuits might face delays, in particular if you're trying to start a blog or work on a website or if you're trying to launch an app. But this is teaching you to take joy seriously and like really apply yourself and focus on like, getting serious about having fun or creating. And when it goes into Pisces in the fall, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for Sag and Sag risings, especially if you're a late degree rising, because it's going to come back into a square with your sun, moon, or rising. And this is going to put more emphasis on what's going on with home, what's going on with family, what's going on with your emotions, like what's going on with your parents. So work with this energy now while it's in a trine to your sun, moon, or rising if you're an early degree. And I really feel like for many of you guys, this is about committing to a creative project long-term and trying to figure out how to like make it happen. And in order to make that happen, you need to balance fun with responsibility. And this is also about listening to your heart's desires in the process and really investing yourself in things that you feel like are going to be the most fulfilling. Good luck. We've got Capricorn and Capricorn rising. What's up, Capricorn? How you doing? You are going to be experiencing Saturn retrograde in Aries in your natal 4th house. Obviously important for you, Capricorn, as Saturn is your ruler, and it is going to be turning retrograde in an angular house. So essentially, your chart ruler is in the 4th house. It's been there for the last couple of months with Neptune. Obviously, the 4th house is home, roots, family, properties, parents, things in regards to the past. So a lot of you guys might find that through the retrograde, there is some challenge, especially if you're an early degree Capricorn, sun, moon, or rising, because Saturn is forming an opening square to your sun, moon, or rising. And that means that there is a challenge. You're being pushed to make a necessary change or a new beginning, Aries, in the 4th house. And a lot of this is about, I think, through the retrograde, rebuilding your emotional or physical foundation, reassessing whether or not you're going to be buying or selling a home, reconnecting with family, going back home even, and really reevaluating what is home to you. Where is home to you? Is it a person? Is it a place? What steps are you going to be taking, or where are you actually holding off making any real big moves when it comes to your home or your living situation right now? Now, Saturn doesn't just rule you, it also rules your 2nd house of money and finances. And I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to that are Capricorn risings that are like, I moved back home with my family, I'm saving money, so I can buy a house, right? Very quite literal to the astrology. Or, I'm going back and forth over a home or an estate matter and trying to figure out, what I'm going to, be selling my mom's house for. Or we're reassessing whether or not we want to, build a house or if we want to buy a house, that kind of stuff. For some of you guys, I think that I would predict what you will expect is that a home or family dynamic might shift. And this is requiring you to set boundaries or maybe take charge in regards to a home or family matter. In the fall, what you will see is that Saturn and Neptune will retrograde back into Pisces, which is a little bit more friendly for Capricorn, especially if you're a late degree, sextiling your ascendant. And what this is going to be bringing up is a lot more of communication issues with family, maybe dealing with siblings or neighbors, reassessing whether or not, you're actually going to move to another place. Maybe you've done a stint somewhere and you've been kind of feeling it out. Maybe you're not really planning on moving until next spring. But that's definitely going to be more communication and kind of your local environment themes. I would say as a tip, first of all, you may change your mind revolving around where you want to live or how you want to decorate your house or whether or not you want to live with somebody or if you want to live alone. And retrogrades are going to give you the okay to change your mind, right? Certain circumstances are going to be changing. Maybe you think you're going to be living where you're living for a while and things change in the fall and suddenly you have the opportunity to move. So keep an open mind. And then secondly, I would also say that this is about creating a nurturing home environment, something that is yours, Aries. And I would say address family issues with maturity, and trust your intuition regarding what home actually means and where home is going to be. I think a lot of you guys are going to be in a situation where you feel stuck or limited in regards to a home situation. In reality, you're actually going to find that that's going to change in the fall, and it's going to give you a whole new opportunity that's kind of opening up for you in the spring of next year. Definitely let me know what's going on, Capricorn and Cap risings. Keep me updated. All right, we've got Aquarius and Aquarius rising. You guys are going to have Saturn retrograde in Aries in your natal third house. Obviously, Saturn is your traditional ruler, so we take a look at what's going on there. And what's nice for you guys is Saturn is not only sextile Pluto in your first house where you're going through big changes and transformations, but simultaneously, it's also sextiling Uranus, your modern day ruler, where there's a lot more spontaneity, creativity, and fun. So you have a lot of support from the cosmos, Aquarius, when it comes to this transit. Now, Saturn doesn't just rule you and your personal kind of appearance and identity. It also rules the 12th house of what's kind of hidden or secretive or behind the scenes. So as Saturn turns retrograde in your third house, this is a house of communication, learning, dealing with siblings, dealing with neighbors, cars, vehicles, and any kind of communication-based stuff. So I think as Saturn retrogrades, what it's going to be bringing up is refining how you communicate, refining how you learn, going back to a course you didn't finish, reconnecting with a sibling or a neighbor, going back and starting your YouTube channel or blogging again, or getting back into writing again. And I predict for you guys that communication projects or studies, there may be some obstacles, but it's coming up because it's pushing you really to kind of clarify your voice or making sure that you're really learning and that you're kind of retaining that information. Now in the fall, you'll see, Saturn and Neptune will go back into Pisces. It's going to be much more about, I think, your resources, your finances, money stuff, self-esteem stuff. But right now, there is an opportunity for you to kind of go back and relearn something or kind of do some kind of investigative work in things that you have studied or kind of learned in the past, reviewing documents, reassessing whether or not you're going to, take on a new creative project, reassessing whether or not you're going to move or whether or not you're going to be, getting a new vehicle. All kinds of third house stuff can be going on for you guys here. And I would just say be deliberate in how you express yourself. Be listening more than you are speaking right now, because listening can really influence the mind in a very big way and kind of help you better connect with other people. Maybe study something practical yet inspiring. I think those are all things that I would really recommend. And especially if you're going to be doing new media or content creation, you're reassessing just what actions you're taking in regards to that, especially if it's YouTubing, blogging, storytelling, anything of that nature with some of the aspects you have in your third and your fifth house. Good luck. And finally, we've got Pisces and Pisces rising. What's up, Pisces? Saturn is going to be turning retrograde in the sign of Aries in your natal second house. And the second house we know deals with finances, spending power, resources, possessions, but also self-esteem, self-worth. And Saturn is directly connected to your 12th house of self-undoing, stuff that's kind of hidden and behind the scenes, and the 11th house of friends, allies, alliances, and goals. So Saturn retrograde in the second house brings up themes of reassessing your values, reassessing your financial stability, overlooking budgeting, what you're spending, what you can afford, what you value, what you want, what you don't want. And yes, it can feel like money or self-esteem issues are surfacing, or there is a delay in funds coming in or a reassessment of what you can spend. But it's happening because it's asking you to build a stronger foundation. Now, Saturn is also retrograde conjunct Neptune, which is your modern day ruler. So this is pretty significant for you because it's trying to get you to think of a new way forward when it comes to money and resources. And I would say that, this is all about creating a budget, sticking to it, reflecting on what truly matters to you right now, valuing yourself beyond material wealth. In the fall, you're going to see Saturn and Neptune retrograde back to your first house, which is going to be the house of self. And it can mean that there is this kind of minimalist mindset. Less is more, I'm more focused on me, what's best for me. Even if I have to release some things or give some things up, so be it. If I have to work harder for the money or if I have to become more independent. A lot of this is, with Mars going through Virgo in the South Node in your 7th, a lot of you guys are grappling with, well, if I, break off the relationship, if I leave the working partnership, if I cut that client off, the physical and the financial implications and like how that's going to impact me. But also needing to trust and kind of believe in yourself and go, actually, you know what, it's worth the piece, or I can do it, or it's going to be pushing me to work harder or find my own way. But there's a lot of stuff tied with finances and other people, in my opinion. And I don't know if this is like friendships, if this is going to be working relationships, if it can be spouses. But I would say watch for that because that's going to be a part of it. And you'll see that through the eclipses in the fall. You'll also see when Saturn and Neptune retrograde back into your sign, that this is going to be a time where you're really kind of going like, okay, I'm letting go of old identities. I'm prioritizing myself, but also giving myself a little bit of grace to really kind of reconfigure like who I am out in the world. And all you know is that you have to put one foot in front of the other and prioritize yourself first. You will see throughout the eclipses and also the trines that you'll see to Jupiter, your chart ruler in the 5th, that you can't put a price on happiness, right? And whether that's like doing whatever it takes, to launch a business, or doing whatever it takes to have a baby, or doing whatever it takes to get away from a relationship that's not working in order to kind of preserve your happiness. These will be some of the things that you're going to see. And the question is at what cost, and what are you willing to kind of either give up, or where are you willing to work harder to overcome some of these things that are kind of happening? So good luck, Pisces. Let me know what happens. All right, guys. Well, wow. Obviously, this is going to be quite a transformative next couple months. Obviously, Saturn retrograde in Aries, the conjunction in Neptune, even the 0 degrees Aries point, it's all pointing to the necessary kind of need to really balance courage with discipline. Obviously, action with intuition and personal growth with collective changes. So whether you're rethinking your identity, your home, your goals during this retrograde, hopefully it's here to kind of help you build something stronger, especially a stronger foundation for yourself in the future. Definitely work with Saturn's lessons, take your time, and obviously let me know how it's playing out for you guys, especially right around this upcoming full moon in Capricorn. If you guys love this video, please give me a thumbs up and like the video. It really helps the channel grow. Also, drop me a comment below and let me know how you're feeling and what your tips and tricks are for this retrograde, what you're realizing about your personal involvement with this retrograde. And make sure you're subscribed. I'm here every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday, trying to make sense of what's going on in the cosmos. Equally, if you guys want some help with this Saturn in Aries transit, click the links below. Head over to my website. I have my Saturn in Aries bootcamp webinar. I've got lots of information, 2 hours of all kinds of tips and tricks and how to navigate this transit like a champ. And I've created predictions as well as cosmic to-do lists for the 12 rising signs to navigate this like a pro. So if you need some help, check that out. Especially during this retrograde, it can be a great time to kind of implement some of that. So I'll catch all of you guys here really soon. I'll be back on Thursday. We're going to talk all about this wild up and coming new moon in Leo. But until then, I'll see all of you very soon and enjoy these transits. Take care.